I'd like to discuss why the following expressions in pairs might or might not be equal. So if we start with part A, we see these two expressions right here. And the usual student way to think is in terms of process. And I want you to take a moment to step away from process. The student approach to this is to say that these two expressions are different because in the second expression, 3 would distribute to the x and to the 5, whereas in this expression, there's no distributing of the 3. Now, while that's true, this leads to some sort of dead ends in terms of ways of thinking of what's going on in terms of skills needed in algebra. So I'd like to think of this differently by saying what's going on here is that first we add, because you have the x plus 5 in parentheses, and then you take whatever x plus 5 is, and that's the whole point of having a variable here. You take whatever x plus 5 is, and you simplify that if you know what x is, but for now we'll just say you take what x plus 5 is, and that result is multiplied by 3. Here you have 3 times x, and then the result of the 3 times x, again, whatever x is, then you have whatever 3x is, so you take that 3 times x, and that is then added to 5. So that's why these are different. In the second one, you have this set of parentheses around y isn't necessary, so you really have 7 times y first, and then that's multiplied by 3. Here, according to the order of operations, you really do the left multiplication here first, and you have 3 times 7, and then that result is multiplied by y. However, when you have multiplication, due to the associative property, it doesn't matter which order you multiply in, so these two are actually the same. In the next example, it's this set of parentheses that doesn't exist over here. However, in both of these, you do the multiplication first. Here, you do it because it's in parentheses, and here you do the multiplication first because multiplication comes before addition. So these two expressions in part C are actually the same. In part D, these two expressions are actually not the same because in this second expression, the division happens before the addition or subtraction. And over here, what happens is this expression 3 plus a divided by 4 minus b, you could actually write it to look something more like this, but then you'd need parentheses around the numerator, 3 plus a, and you need parentheses around the denominator, 4 minus b. Part E, these expressions are equal. They are equivalent expressions because the parentheses are around the multiplication, so the multiplication happens before the addition does. In part F, you might again be tempted to think about things like the distributive property. Please don't think about here B distributes to C and D, but here you don't have that, because in a sense you kind of do. So instead, I want to point out that here it's A plus B, whatever that is being multiplied by C plus D, whatever that ends up being, depending on what the values of the variables are. In the second expression, you really have C plus D first, okay, because that's in parentheses. Then whatever C plus D is being multiplied by something. Over here, yeah, C plus D is being multiplied by something, and that something is A plus B, but over here, C plus D is being multiplied by what? It's just by B. And then that result, whatever that product is, once we've done the multiplying, then we're gonna add A to that, and that's it. In part G, we have P times Q in parentheses, so we do that first, and then R times S is in parentheses, we do that, and then we'd add the results, and here we do the same because these multiplications would come before this addition. In this next example, I'm trying to scan and see that the only removed parentheses are around this 2 and around this 4. Now, when you have a parenthesis around just a constant, that's a pure number like 2, 4, or 17, then that's not going to change the order in which you do any of the multiplications or additions or subtractions, so these expressions are in fact the same. Over here, we have some multiplication dots removed, but beyond that, all we are doing is multiplying A, B, C, and this thing called D plus 1, and that's happening over here, so these two expressions end up being the same. In part J, now you see I kept the parentheses around the 8, I kept the parentheses around the x minus 5, great. The thing is, we still have this 10 times whatever x minus 5 is. That's the same here, even though the 10 is out of parentheses. When I stare at this second part after the plus sign, those really are going to be the same, even though the 10 is not in parentheses. The difference is really in the first part, because in the first part, you have 8 times this entire thing, this whatever t to the 4th minus 3 was, once that's simplified, it's 8 times that whole thing, whereas over here, due to the order of operations, you really have 8 times the 3 alone, and then from t to the 4th you end up subtracting whatever the 3 times 8 is. So these two are different because here 8 is multiplied by 3 only, and here 8 is multiplied by this entire thing, t to the 4th minus 3.